On the radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
Welcome to On the Radar. I'm meteorologist Ross Whitley. It's been a couple of weeks since you see me, and Matthew Huddleston here with me as well. He was here last week and the week prior and the week prior. And
a lot of shows in a row.
That's right. And we just came out of holiday season, so you've probably seen our faces a lot on air as of late. We're back into the digital role here and have an exciting episode for you. We're going to talk about 2025, the year that was, weather-wise. It was an exciting year. We broke some 1,000-day snow drought across the triangle here. We had some really hot temperatures in the middle of the summer, and we're going to talk some cold as well. And Matthew and I's favorite topics, at least to talk weather-wise, is obviously winter weather, if we haven't hidden that well enough for you now.
The cold, the snow, just everything that winter brings.
That's right. We love it all. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some people that maybe want to get rid of the snow a little bit as well. And then we're going to end the show with some sunshine. We're going to talk about the sun, the Earth's orbit, and the seasons, and then a little bit why you see the sun kind of change angles as we go throughout the year. So a whole lot to talk about in this show, and if you've watched On the Radar with me leading this, you know that I have problems keeping us on time. So we're going to try to stay on time.
We're going to keep time today, hopefully.
We are. Yes, hopefully. Matthew is here to be the taskmaster.
I'll rein you in.
Yeah, that's right. We do have the clock up, so we've got that running. So let's jump right to it. So you created this graphic, Matthew, and it's a pretty cool one. It kind of walks us through pretty simply what we saw last year. So what sticks out to you?
Yeah, it was quite the year last year, seeing 2 days at 100 degrees back on June 23rd and 24th. That was the warmest day by far of the year, seeing several days in a row in the 90s in that month too, but overall the hottest period was that point in June. And then of course the coldest morning not too long ago, about a month or so ago, 14 degrees back in mid-December. The rainiest day was actually in August. It was not Chantal as it came through at the airport itself in Raleigh, 3.59 inches back on August 6th. And the snowiest day around a year ago or so back on February 19th, just over 2 inches at the airport itself.
Yeah, and right now we're talking about warmth. We are getting ready to see a pattern change. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But the snowiest day back in February on the 19th, and at this point in time last year, we were actually getting ready to see a winter storm. We only saw 0.7 of an inch recorded at RDU, but it was one of the first snowstorms of the year, and it broke a 1,000-day snow drought. There had been 1,000 days prior to the last time that Raleigh had recorded even a trace of snow. So last year we broke the drought. We've already seen traces of snow this winter, not officially in winter, but prior to winter starting. And so hopefully we're getting ready to get into a pattern that if you are a winter weather fan, as we are, maybe we will see one. And I thought it was quite odd that the wettest day did not fall during Chantal. That happening in August, so that was after Chantal. Chantal was
back in early to mid-July.
Yeah, in July.
Came through.
Yeah, so that was around July 4th. So kind of crazy that Raleigh did not get all that much in on the rain. It was a little further off to the west where the heaviest rain did fall, and it was kind of a narrow band, but still, you would have thought that Raleigh would have ended up in that same kind of thing. Coldest morning being the 14th. There was a day in January last year that did go down to 16 degrees, but that cold snap we just had at the beginning of December, really the middle of the month, was the coldest temperatures we saw in 2025. So that is kind of crazy too as well. So goes to show you never really know when you're going to get that cold snap, whether it's early or in our traditional winter.
And it's kind of ironic too, as you said, kind of seeing not only the coldest temperature, but also some snow events so far in the past month or so actually taking place just before the winter season officially arrived, late fall. So it can happen anytime in the fall and winter, but hopefully if you're a snow lover, things are going to look up towards the coming months.
Yeah, well, hopefully we're seeing a change because we were talking about warmth in the pattern.
Yeah.
And talking about warmth, how about last year ending up in the top 10? It wasn't the record breaker that was 2024, but ending up at 7th for the warmest years on record. A lot of that had to do with not only the heat that we saw in June and July, but also the overnight lows. So our dew points are going to be a record breaker. The official numbers really haven't come out yet on the year that was, but the dew points are going to end up being close to 60-degree dew points, which is absolutely insane when you're talking about the average temperature being 62.6. And of course, that is all your highs and all of your lows averaged together, which is how we get the average temperature. And so those overnight lows were really very warm this year. And that is what's going to keep us up there in that top 10. Again, not the record breaker that we saw last year in the 2024 or 2 years ago at this point, but still a very warm year. And we have a lot to thank to that summer months for that.
Yeah, and it's amazing, too, just the difference 1 or 2 nights can make, because the difference in 4th place and 7th place being just 0.1 degrees, so just 1 or 2 days likely brought us just below that threshold to 7th warmest all time.
Yeah, I actually did a write-up, so if you read the write-up online, I did it the last day of the year, so the last day was not in the record report, and it came out 62.7, so that last day's official record must have dropped us down to 62.6, which is crazy, because I didn't think that one day would make a difference in the average, but we must have been right on that threshold when you were averaging it out. And we did end December relatively chilly. We kind of started to warm up into the pattern that we see now as we ended up rounded out December, and we're getting ready to see that pattern change. Speaking of a difference in temperatures, let's talk this month, 1977. And if you want your jaw to hit the floor, check out these daily highs. That's insane.
Yeah, don't complain about it being cold, because nothing like it was back in 1977. Several days in a row, the 17th all the way through the 20th, around freezing, if not far below, a high of just 20 degrees back on the 17th of that month of that year.
Yeah, there's only a handful, about 10 days that were at the average. Well, no, there's only one day at the average. The 27th, our average high in January is 52. So the 27th being one day at the average, everything else was below average.
I think all the oranges there must be 40 degrees or above, taking a look at that.
Yeah.
So even the ones that are in the orange, a lot of those, except for 1 or 2, very below average still.
Yeah, just the 27th and 28th. And by that point in time in the month, we actually see our average jump up to 53. So even those days,
even that's
were below average. So the entire month, below average temperatures. That was cold. And we were curious, because we're winter weather fans. We had to know how much snow fell in 1977. And as true as North Carolina would be, even in a crazy cold pattern, we saw no snow. It was only 1.8 inches of snow. There was one event. Well, there's 2 events, but one was only 0.2 of an inch, and then the other one just over 1.4 inches of snow. So, yeah, no capitalization on the cold air. So hopefully as we get into this pattern, at least it's a little more active. Maybe we can squeeze something out, because overall it has been relatively dry, and it has been relatively warm so far for this start of the year, but we are going to see that pattern change. Speaking of what this pattern has brought, and that is a lot of snow to the northeast, because cold air has been trapped up there. We've seen kind of a ridge across the southeast, which means you get kind of the low pressure systems to track across the Great Lakes, which tends to lead to a lot of lake effect snow. I know Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse always battle it out for the Snow Kings of New York. I think this year you can just hand the crown to Syracuse.
Yeah, it's all kind of funneled in one spot this year so far. Yeah,
they've seen lake effect just funneled right over the top of them. I think last count I saw, they had over 80 inches of snow there already for the winter. So yeah, just hand them the crown already. And we have some video out of that, because they've been absolutely dumped on. So let's toss it up to New York so we can show you what that lake effect looks like. And you tell me if anybody in this video looks happy.
This really started as a slow burn today, then it took off. Around 12:30 this afternoon, that's when snow really started coming down. The snow here is thick and heavy, and even after plows go through, it doesn't take long for roads to fill back in. Police say it's not just the amount of snow, it's how quickly it's falling, making this storm different from what they've seen in recent years.
Not much, because we can't. Lots of snow, slippery roads. That's it. Freezing. People just trying to stay in and off the roads.
Yeah.
Looks fun, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I love snow, so
Yeah,
I
me
would love
too.
to experience that. But at the same time, I think after about 3 or 4 days, we'd be pretty much over it by that point. We'd be like, we can get rid of this.
Snow is nice when you have nowhere to go, but if you have to go out like grocery shopping or just going to work, it's obviously not the best thing to have on the roads.
Yeah, I had to endure snow in Florida last year. I had got to take
Of all
part.
places.
Got to take part in that historic storm. Places of the Panhandle got 10 inches of snow last year, and that was. It was a blast. It was about as much fun as I've ever had driving on the roads because people in Florida were scared to death of snow. They did not go out. Nobody went out on the roads at all. So I had fun driving home that night. But yeah, if you got to work in it, it's not the greatest thing. As we come back, we are actually going to talk about the chances of snow in January, the frequency of which we see it, the pattern that we need to develop, and then we're going to wrap up as we get into some crazy stats and some cool things about the sun. That's when we return.
On the radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team. On the radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
Welcome back. Meteorologist Matthew Huddleston and meteorologist Ross Whitley here with you. And last we left you, we were talking about some crazy cold in January, some snow up in Syracuse, where they've been dumped on by the lake effect. So let's talk about snow here in Raleigh and the frequency. You actually created a really cool graphic that talks exactly about this. So let's have you walk us through this.
Yeah, if you want snow in Raleigh, North Carolina, this is certainly the month seeing the most snow typically on this month of the year, going back to 1887, 89 times, 52% of Januaries have seen at least a measurable amount of snow, all the way down to even just 2 times over the year, seeing 20 plus inches at the airport. Of course, all the amounts in between, but this is the best time of the year to see snow in the area.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy to think that, you know, you're going back to 1887, so this is a pretty long track, but 89 times that we've seen snow in January. Of course, that is on the smaller amount. So there's plenty of Januaries that go by snowless.
Yes.
Sad. You can cue the Pac-Man
Sad
sound.
but true,
Just the
yes.
wah, wah, wah. But there is the rare end of the bell curve, if you will, where we see 6+ inches of snow.
Yeah.
And, of course, our record snowfall that ever fell here in Raleigh happening in the month of January. That was toward the end of the month. So, hey, there's still, if you're an optimist, there's still time to break that record.
It
right?
might be warm now, but there are still plenty of days left in the month for sure.
We could potentially break that record. So what do we need to see for there to be snow here, Matthew?
You know, we need the cold air, obviously, to be in place. And most of the time for us, not the moisture chasing the cold air, actually the low pressure riding up the coast, as is the case in this graphic here. But a lot of times locally, we're just a little too warm to see a full snow event. A lot of times ice, a mix, sleet, all the above. But if things come together just right, seeing snow across our area.
Yeah, typically we don't have high pressure locked in. And if we do have high pressure locked in, that typically takes that track, the low, a little too far to the south. Yeah. So whenever that happens, then we end up dry. We might have some flurries or some light snow across the area, but it ends up being relatively dry because that high pressure is just too strong for the low to overcome. For us to get a big snowstorm, we kind of need the low and the high to connect right around the same time. So that typically means that if you think about the circulation of the low pressure system, it being counterclockwise, as the low is approaching, it's pumping warm air into the Carolinas. So we're at bare minimum seeing warm, moist air overriding some colder air that may already be in place, but we need a reinforcing shot of that colder air to come in. So we kind of need that high and low to sync up and work in tandem for us to really end up in a big snow event. And that is part of the reason why we're either talking about mixed precipitation, it being too dry, or we get ice because we've got warm air overriding the colder air that's already locked in place, as opposed to it just being a full-on snow event, because the frequency of cold and the frequency of moisture lining up are just relatively rare. That's why we get it kind of once in a blue moon when we see a big snowstorm. And talking about big snowstorms, we did have exactly this, and I've kind of done a deep dive here since joining the weather team here in Raleigh on this snow event. Actually, before we get there, let's talk about when snow falls a little bit more. So, January, 50% of the average, as you alluded to. So this is the time.
The best month.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
this is the time of the year. This is the best month for us to see that snow. But if you're a winter weather fan and it ends up being a snowless January, it can still happen.
Yeah, there's still hope. February, March, seeing 27% of our snow. In February, 6% in March, and even April and parts of November seeing some snows over the years.
Yeah, and I think I remember a record for the state that actually happened in April. Now, to no surprise, it comes from the higher elevations. Mount LeConte, which splits the border of North Carolina and Tennessee. So this is actually a shared record. But LeConte recorded 60 inches of snow one April. And that kind of makes sense if you think about spring storms. We typically still have some colder air aloft that's probably not down to the surface level of our elevation here. We're around 400 feet in elevation. They're up over 2,000 feet in elevation. LeConte is over 4,000 feet in elevation. So once you get up into that level of elevation, you still have some cold air around with the spring storms, kind of the wraparound moisture plus northwest flow. And that's going to lead to a bigger amount of moisture to work with in that higher elevation. So it makes sense for it to be March and April. I know that Mitchell also has a 50-plus inch snowstorm.
Okay.
So it's not too far behind that. And if you go back to 2016, like one of the last big snowstorms across the state, Mitchell, I think, had like 44 inches in that storm, which is nuts. That was like 4 or 5 inches an hour all day long across Mount Mitchell.
And I think Mitchell's one of the only places in the state that's seeing snow at least a little bit on every single month of the year. So, yes, that record also 40, 50-plus inches one time, so a lot of records in that part of the mountains.
Yeah, well, you're talking high elevation,
True.
So that's not a luxury.
Not quite as difficult for them. Yes.
Yeah, it's not really a luxury we have here.
We can't go that high.
Yeah, we kind of rely on all those things syncing up. So the average snowfall in January is 2.4 inches, and the average in February also 2.4 inches. So it really only takes one storm.
Yeah.
We get one storm, we can see 3 to 4 inches fall, and then we are above the average. And so that's kind of what we rely on here. For us to meet the average for the season total, we really only need one storm. We're not going to be talking about, multiple storms. Rarely do we have a full winter where we have 3 or 4 winter events. Typically we see 1 or 2 and probably 1 mixed precip event.
Yeah.
So that's usually how the winter goes. So not a whole lot of snow. So
yeah, you might get a few like dustings or a little flurry events like we saw last month, but as far as multiple major events, not very likely on any given year, but a couple of times in the year that we've seen 6 inches plus. So we'll see exactly what this year has in store. Of course, January through March being this winter, and then still this December down the road that has to come through too for the year.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess December's totals last year actually went to last winter, which is a little weird to think about, but yeah, because it just happened. But there is a big snowstorm that set the record in this month, and it was over 20 inches, 20.3 inches of snow that fell at the airport officially, and some places across the area reported as much as 2 feet of snow out of the storm. If you were around in 2000, you remember it. I was living in the middle of the state, so I do remember this storm. It was a little different there. We only had about 6 inches of snow where I lived, so not the 20 plus that fell here, but it still was a significant storm even across the Piedmont from where I was. And I think there were actually a couple of winter events in 2000. So 2000 to 2002 actually had a couple of pretty nice snow events, kind of odd winters for us, if you will. And this was not forecasted very well.
Yeah.
This was one of those storms that
Kinda
on
snuck
the
up
models,
on us.
on the models, it looked like this was going to be a relatively minor event. But as the event started to unfold, we could see that moisture was really ramping up and moving toward this direction. And then we had the luck of basically an occlusion. So that doesn't happen a ton here, where you kind of get a low to separate from the frontal boundaries itself and then sit idle over one area. That happened combined with this storm, which led to places basically all the way down from Pinehurst all the way up into Mecklenburg County, Virginia, where you had snowfall rates of 3 to 4 inches an hour. So that's a lot of snow falling in a very short period of time.
That's a lot around anywhere, but especially here.
Yeah, that makes things quite extreme whenever that happens. So that pretty much shuts things down. And speaking of extreme...
This is too extreme for me, though. Think about the coldest temperature ever in Raleigh being -9 degrees back in 1985. How about -40 plus? That's the case up across portions of Alaska. This is Fairbanks, the 40 Below Club. A lot of people each year take pictures in front of the University of Alaska Fairbanks sign. Here, -42 degrees Celsius, very close to being the same with Fahrenheit, -45 degrees there. And one thing that stands out, people take pictures in their swimsuits, underwear, just a lack of clothing for that event.
Yeah, and having experienced below zero for the first time in my life, I went to school in Asheville, so it did get quite cold there a couple of times, but we only dropped down to zero. So I had never actually experienced below zero. I went skiing in Montana last year, and it was 5 below zero a couple of days in a row, and then ended the trip on a winter storm where it was actually above zero. It was like 3 degrees, but the wind was blowing about 30 miles an hour, so it felt like 15 to 20 below.
But I'm sure you didn't ski like this. You had more
No,
layers on.
I had lots of layers. In fact, I was never cold. The only time I got cold on that trip is when I took my ski glove off because my goggles had frozen solid just from the condensation of my mouth, and I tried to rub the ice out of my goggles with my thumb. And when I did that, my hand was just turning like the red of radar on this screen.
It's almost instantaneous.
And I was like, oh, my hand is freezing. Like literally I am freezing the cells on my hand as we speak, so it wasn't like the numb feeling. It was just straight burn. And that's got to be what this dude is feeling. I'm guessing he's had a little courage help.
Probably. A little help along
maybe
the way.
a little liquid courage to do that. However, I think this girl, she might have, well, not him. He's probably had some liquid courage
probably him
too.
But the last one,
I think she
might have,
ran there. I think she ran in that outfit to that sign.
She was just jogging around town, decided to take a picture by the sign.
Yeah, I mean, at least I can say, at least she does have boots on.
Yes.
She's got those thermal boots on.
Keeping the feet warm.
So the feet are warm. I don't think anything else is. Maybe the ears.
The head with the hat on, but -45, it kind of all seeps in everywhere.
Yeah, fun fact, when you do the math, 40 below zero in Fahrenheit and Celsius is identical. So that is the number in which they actually meet. So right there at 40 below is about the same temperature, whether it be in Celsius or Fahrenheit. And then once you go away from there, it starts to separate once again. And then everything above freezing is obviously a big separation as well. But that's one of those funny little arithmetic things. So you can say that to your friends now that you've watched this. You can say, do you know the temperature in which Fahrenheit and Celsius are the same? Because I do.
Might need it for Jeopardy one day too.
That's
and
right.
Now you know.
Yeah. Maybe that'll be on Pop Jeopardy. Maybe we'll bring it into the pop culture realm there, Matthew. I don't know if we're that popular, but we'll see. How about some space? Let's talk about this real briefly as we go forward. We just had the closest approach of the sun of the year, which is called
the
perihelion.
Perihelion, yes.
Yes.
I'm bad at pronouncing words there.
So yeah, it's the perihelion. So that means that we were 91.4 million miles away from the sun, as opposed to the
that close.
Yeah, real close. As opposed to the aphelion, which is the furthest away from the sun, 94.5 million miles. So I joked on social media and I said, did you notice? Because obviously you didn't, because our seasons are controlled by the tilt of the earth. It has nothing to do with our approach of the sun. But it is kind of interesting that the closest we get to the sun is during the northern hemisphere's winter.
Yeah.
And the farthest away we get from the sun is when we are all scorching, July 6th this year. And that is all thanks to the tilt of the earth. So we're tilted away from the sun here in the northern hemisphere right now. In the summer, we are tilted toward the sun. So we're getting a majority of the sun's rays on the northern half of the equator during the summer, which is why we get those seasonal shifts. But little fun fact there for you. This does have a consequence on overall just solar radiation, but that is about it. Everything else boils down to the tilt, which is exactly where we see our summer solstice, our equinoxes, and our winter solstice. So both solstices as we change seasons, which have everything to do with our sunrise and sunset. Our highest point of the sun being in the sky is during the summer.
Which makes sense. The longest days likely during the summer too. And as far as the sun angle goes, that's when it's highest in the sky. So the radiation is a bit worse. UV index is higher during the summer too. Right in the middle towards spring and fall, the equinox on March 20th, just about 2 months away. The fall equinox on September 22nd. That's kind of in the middle ground too. And of course, the most recent one, the winter solstice back on December 21st. The sunset now is at about 5:16. The sunset by summer, the latest one, around 8:33 in the evening.
Yeah. So next time you talk about daylight saving time and the change on all of that, it really doesn't have a major effect on how much sunlight we see. It just has an effect on our time. So our daytime. That's it. The sunlight is longer in the summer because our sun angle is higher in the sky. So we're not really going to, even if we got rid of daylight, or if we kept daylight saving time, then we would only see an additional 30 minutes to 45 minutes of sunlight in the afternoon. It would still be dark early in the winter because our sun angle is low. And it would be dark later in the morning versus what we have now if we kept saving time. So that's the only reason why that shift happens, is just so that we can adjust to the sunlight being later in the morning and earlier in the evening. So that's why that exists. So if you ever wondered, even if we got rid of it or kept it, it wouldn't change things all that much because the tilt of the Earth changing the amount of sunlight that we see. But we did just have our latest sunrise. That's actually happening all this week.
The latest one.
The latest sunrise, which is around the same time as our earliest sunset, which makes perfect sense because we're here on the shortest days of the year. So as we gain time throughout the year, we see that change with our sunsets and sunrise, vice versa. So what does that look like? Well, earliest sunrise happening in June, about June 12th-ish at about 5:58. So that's a really long day.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Which makes sense. Yeah, because it's not too far away from the summer solstice. So one of the longest days of the year. It actually happens just prior to our longest daylight of the year, which happens when our sun is highest in the sky. We just had our latest sunrise, which happens all this week. Basically from the 5th through about the 10th, we see the sunrise right around 7:25 in the morning.
Yeah, I like the sun actually rising earlier and earlier because when you wake up, the sun's actually already up. It makes a nice start to the day. And once the sun starts to rise at about 7:25, the latest, of course, as you mentioned, most of the time when I wake up, it's still dark outside. Not a great way to start the day, but as the sunrise gets earlier and earlier, no matter what time you get up, be it after 5:58, seeing the sunrise after that point.
Yep. So that's going to do it for this week's On the Radar. Thanks for joining us. If you have any email concerns, you can email us at weather@cbs17.com. Send us some information, things you'd like us to cover, that kind of stuff, and you can see it here on the radar, as opposed to us just coming up with the topics and telling you what we think is interesting. We want to hear what you guys think. So thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week.
On the Radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.